So I've been watching a lot of YouTube lately, as always, and I have run down the rabbit hole of vintage enthusiasts reviewing period pieces from pre-1800s mostly, and how accurate they are to the actual time period. But what I haven't been seeing very often, or really at all, I haven't really looked for it, but it hasn't popped up on my feed either, so who knows if it's out there. Vintage enthusiasts reviewing more modern vintage fashion. I pretty much specialize in 60s to early 2000s, and if we're being honest, like late 80s to early 2000s is what I usually am looking towards. I've been a vintage seller for 3 years, and I've been wearing vintage pieces pretty much every day, so I feel like I have a little bit of authority. Definitely not an expert. No formal training in fashion or history. But I feel like for every 18th, 19th century period drama, there is a show or a movie that takes place in any time from the 60s to the 90s that was made recently. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of pre-1900s period clothing that isn't so great, and this is kind of understandable to me because it takes a special kind of person to be able to sift through 100-plus-year-old documents that aren't available with just a quick Google search. You have to really be looking for what you're looking for. But I feel like the opposite is true for the last 50 years of fashion. Today, if you haven't already guessed, we are talking about the Carrie Diaries. This was a show on the CW that aired from 2013 to 2014 and had 2 seasons, and it is a prequel to the late 90s, early 2000s hit Sex and the City. Now, I have never seen Sex and the City, and I have only seen a few episodes of the Carrie Diaries. Just to preface this, I am not an expert in both, but I have been talking to people who are fans. I've also been watching a couple of videos. From my understanding, Sex and the City was a groundbreaking HBO show at the time because of its extremely modern fashion, and it showed grown women like after their 20s and their 30s or even 40s talking frankly about sex and relationships. And the Carrie Diaries is a prequel to that, which follows 16-year-old Carrie Bradshaw in the 80s. So it has none of those things. So I think the concept itself is a little more flawed than the creators realized based on the demographic of the original Sex and the City. Sex and the City was very influential in its fashion, and the designer behind it is Eric Damon. And he actually returned and did the costume designing for the Carrie Diaries, which is great because he's technically designing for the same character, but the demographics for the Carrie Diaries is very different in a very different time. As I was saying, the original Sex and the City came out in the early to mid 2000s, and there were a few movies after that. I think the last movie was in like 2010. So the audience who had grown up with Sex and the City in 2013 were probably nearing their 30s. But the Carrie Diaries seems to be very marketed towards the young teen audience. Obviously, the main character is a 16-year-old, and I remember when the show came out, I was 12, and there were interviews with the designer and Anna Sophia Robb plastered all over teen magazines back when Teen Vogue and 17 were still in print. And the fashion is definitely not a realistic depiction of the 80s, but I'm not sure it was supposed to be. In this Teen Vogue interview I mentioned before, I remember reading this 8 years ago now. God, I feel old. Eric Damon says, Carrie had a great style evolution this year, growing from Connecticut schoolgirl to New York City fashionista. I really loved giving her retro looks a modern spin by creating what we call 80s aspirational authenticity. 80s aspirational authenticity just sounds like 3 words strung together, in my opinion. Like, obviously it takes place in the 80s. It's aspirational in that it's better and what people in the 80s wanted to dress like, I guess. And then authenticity, which in any sense of the word, it's really not. So that's all I could find for what he has to say about the authenticity of the pieces. This entire article is very interesting. We'll circle back to this. But I don't think I'm the first one to point this out. I don't think the Carrie Diaries has aged as well as Sex and the City. And that could be because of the 10 to 15 year fashion cycle, which I've talked about in a previous video. 2013 is a little too recent for that, but 80s stuff has been in for a while. And I just don't think that we are going to look too kindly on the Carrie Diaries moving forward, if we even think of it at all. So the first thing that we're going to do is look through some of the outfits from the first couple episodes. I did not watch the entire series or even like look at all of the outfits from the entire series because I don't have time for that, and I've watched the first few episodes and it's just not that interesting or engaging for me, and I don't want to put myself through that. So we are going to look through some screenshots I have taken and take a look at the fashion. Get my handy dandy laptop. Need one more sticker right here, and I need some tape on this. We're working through it. We're working through it. Okay, first off, we have the opening credits. Carrie is in her room with her dad, and I just want you to take a look around her room for a sec and see what's wrong here. I'll help you out a little bit. Look at that belt. Look at that 2008 Hot Topic rainbow studded Scene Kid belt. We're already not off to a great start. And now we're in the intro, and Carrie is walking through New York City wearing a teal seafoam denim jacket that looks very, very thin. The quality of the denim is going to be a recurring theme throughout this entire thing, just a warning. And a confetti black party dress that seems to have like a boob tube, like strapless top. And then she, again, is wearing these like 2008 Scene Kid rainbow zebra print hoop earrings. And again, you were seeing designs in the 80s that had rainbow, animal print, but not to this degree. And something that we will see in that interview is I'm gonna go ahead and say every single piece in this show is modern. And that is a very interesting choice, considering that 80s clothing is still widely available, and it was even more widely available in the secondhand market in 2013. Very interesting choice. Here is Carrie on her first day of her internship at the fashion company, magazine, whatever. I honestly don't remember. She is wearing kind of a peasant top that seems to be a very thin chiffon material, and a short pencil skirt and pumps. So I found out that this show takes place in 1984, which kind of throws off the entire thing for me because a lot of the things in this are just screaming Halloween store version of late 80s, early 90s. But this is kind of lacking that. So the thing about workwear in the 80s that everyone knows about is the power suit and lots of shoulder pads. Like, this is a jumpsuit, obviously intended more for casual wear, but it still has shoulder pads. Most women's t-shirts had shoulder pads. It was a really big trend, especially in the mid 80s, especially in workwear. And this entire screenshot, there is just no shoulder pads in sight. And again, Carrie is 16 years old. She's not a corporate woman working in New York City. She has an internship, but I would still expect a little bit more volume from her. Okay, next, Carrie goes to visit a Century 21 store on her lunch break, and there is a woman trying on 3 glittery fanny packs. Hello? One is again that teal color covered in sequins. One appears to be a black star pattern, and then the other is pink zebra print again. And if you look really close, do the 2 black circles in the fanny pack look like Bluetooth speakers to you? I don't know about that. Let's move on. Next up, Carrie meets a fashion designer, and this happens.
Your bag! Ah! Aren't you trying to steal my purse? No.
I'm not gonna say Carrie Bradshaw is a casual racist, but
It's just not me.
You wear gold jewelry?
Yeah, like ghetto gold for fun, but this is my engagement ring.
next up, Carrie is on her way to school and she is wearing what looks like printed jeggings and a H&M lavender zip up and a waffle print sweater with, again, a teal backpack. So we just have to get this out of the way. Spandex was invented in 1959 and stretch denim didn't become really used at all until the late 70s, but even though it had been invented and it was being used by some top designers, it was not that popular. I'm just gonna use a pair of my jeans as an example. Here are a pair of 100% cotton Lee jeans. These, oh, you probably know these as mom jeans. These were wildly popular in the 80s. And the denim, if you look closely, is very sturdy, very thick single stitch stitching, and it's just overall like very sturdy, thick denim. Do you know what I mean? And then these are a pair of jeans I just borrowed from my mom's closet. These are Gap jeans, modern. They are 71% cotton, 27% polyester, and 2% spandex. As you can see, obviously the washes are slightly different, so this isn't a perfect comparison, but this has a lot more stretch than these. These basically have no stretch. And that's great because for a more comfortable wear. I certainly don't enjoy this type of denim because it just feels and seems really cheap to me. Like, if I wanted to, I could just rip this pocket off with like one hand, but I'm not going to because I love my mom. So yeah, these are meant to be skin tight on pretty much anyone in the right size who wears them. And then these are meant to have a tight at the waist but more relaxed flared fit at the hips. Carrie is wearing jeggings. And here come the bane of my existence, the popular girls. I do not know any of their names. They are wearing Party City costumes and Party City makeup and Party City wigs. No, they're not wearing wigs, but honestly, their hair is better than Carrie's. It's more accurate than Carrie's, but the rest is just a mess. They, again, are wearing jeggings, cropped fit jeggings that are low-rise, and I don't even think low-rise was popular in 2013. And what looks to be Justice belts and tops and cropped white denim. I guess they were using like really light denim as a substitute for acid wash. And they're all wearing ballet flats, which I guess. This is just a perfect example of what the average person thinks the 80s are. Cheaply made, mass-produced clothing in neon colors and skin tight. A lot of this is taken from the aerobics trend of the 80s. A lot of aerobics wear and workout wear in general in the 80s fit all of those descriptions. And because that trend was so prevalent, it was basically the athleisure of the 80s, people tend to take trends from within that trend and apply it to all 80s wear, which just leads to a mess. Carrie makes out with a shirtless boy in a pool and makes me very uncomfortable. Carrie is washing her dad's car with her sister, and her sister is meant to be the kind of pre-alternative teen. She wears a lot of Joy Division and like Depeche Mode shirts, and she wears dark eyeliner. I don't think she's wearing it in this because she's in like sweatpants, but this Joy Division shirt is just killing me. Again, the fabric quality, everything in the 80s, pretty much everything in the 80s was just thicker and better quality. Like, this shirt is so thin. I can just see it through the screen, especially with the raised wide neck collar. That just wasn't really a thing unless it was like an off the shoulder top. And just the print, you can tell it's actually not like raised at all like most printed band shirts were in the 80s. It's just very thin, very modern from Urban Outfitters. I feel like the blonde girl's hair is what they're trying to get across for Carrie's hair, but like are not doing. They're just too scared to have their main character have accurate hair. Let's talk about Carrie's hair for a second. Carrie's hair is basically straight the first couple inches at the roots, and then falls into beautiful ironed curls, beautiful loose ironed curls all the way to the bottom. And this was just not how people did their hair in the 80s. A lot of women who wanted to have curly hair on a daily basis got perms. And when they got perms, they weren't doing light waves, kind of like the Brazilian blowout is now. That's really popular. My mom does it sometimes. It's more tight ringlets with the curling rods being very, very small to create really tight ringlets that looked more like a natural curl. And the amount of hairspray and the amount of teasing they did made it look not so natural, especially on these like pale white blonde women. But that was the style. And if people did use heat to curl their hairs, they were usually crimping it or using, again, a much smaller, tighter rod. I can see Miss Knockoff Kelly Kapowski trying to hide her low-rise jeans under that notebook. Girl, you are not fooling anyone. I can see rhinestones on your pocket. And she's wearing a crop top, quarter length. It looks very thin again, and some tacky gold jewelry, which is pretty accurate. And her hair, again, is more of a early to mid 90s, and considering that's 10 years later, it's not that great. Again, she's giving major Kelly Kapowski vibes in the hair, which is kind of a look. This is more of a toned down version of it. She's got more of the beach wave. And then last thing I wanted to talk about, this is not the first episode, I believe it's the third and fourth. They have a Halloween episode. What period piece is complete without a Halloween episode with culturally relevant costumes? So Carrie is Princess Diana, who had, I believe, just recently gotten married. That happened in the early 80s, right? I watched The Crown a little bit with my mom. Not an expert, but honestly, I had this episode on mute and I was just skipping through it, looking through all of the costumes, and I could immediately tell this was Princess Diana. So they did a good job with that. The huge sleeves and the crown and the, I don't know what it was called at the time, but it's kind of a grown out bowl cut. Very Diana. The crown really helps again. So that was good. Again, I don't know if that was that popular of a costume for a 16-year-old girl at the time. Princess Diana was very popular, but I don't know if she was that popular with younger teens, and I would say she was more popular with their mothers, at least in the United States. Love interest number 2, I don't know his name. I'm assuming by the plastic bowling hat, he is supposed to be the guy from A Clockwork Orange, but the entire costume is just so cheap that it could really be just anything. And that's most of the costumes in this. He has the thinnest fake eyelash on his bottom lash as possible, so it is from the Clockwork Orange. It just doesn't show up well at all. And then again, you can just see a lot of actual Party City costumes. I know I've been calling the costume design in this like Party City quality the entire time, but this is actually Party City quality. Like, most of them are just wearing masks and like mesh tank tops. Like this, like half the guys are shirtless. I don't know what the costume designer was thinking. They were like, oh, we ran out of budget for Halloween. Take your shirt off, kids. You can't pay for it. This woman is wearing a aerobics suit, and again, I'm not really sure if she's supposed to be Jane Fonda or like a specific aerobics coach, but to me this is kind of just like what someone would wear right now to an 80s themed Halloween party. We have like 80sception going on. Like, I'm starting to think that this is some kind of alternate universe where the Cold War went into 2013 and everyone is just pretending it's the 80s. I don't know. I was really looking at this and I was like, does that bitch have 2 identical lava lamps? I'm like looking and I'm like, I just don't understand how mirrors work. Like, I walk past a mirror and I'm like, who's that? The room design is just so lazy. Like, this is just like a printed out picture of a Space Invader that says game over. This is what like a 10-year-old boy would have hanging in his room now if he had cool parents. Like, definitely not a teenage girl in 1984. But I think that is enough for the screenshots from the show, and why don't we get back onto that interview that I was talking about. That should be very interesting. So this is the costume designer behind the Carrie Diaries, breaks down his favorite looks. With the first season coming to a close, this is very old, Eric Damon dishes on the show's style highlights. So these are supposed to be the best outfits of the entire first season, so let's get into it. First off, we have Miss Laughlin wearing a pencil skirt and a peplum top with shoulder pads, which is a nice change. I actually think this looks pretty nice, except for the shoes. This is like 2012 Jeffrey Campbell Lita shoes with an open toe. And studs. I can't. Next is a picture of, again, Carrie in jeggings and a very thin sweater. And this is described as Carrie's cool school style combines cool school style. What a lyrical genius. Combines patterns and textures. And this look is my favorite example of that. I give this report card sweater an A+, and she earns extra credit for pairing it with those great horse print jeans. By the way, both of these pieces are from Urban Outfitters. Of course they are. Of course. This makes me want to puke. Like, this makes me want to puke. She is wearing a knee-length skirt with an elastic band, and the print is cassette tapes. This is like me having the Spotify app logo just all over my shirt, like femme lesbian realness. Oh God. I don't even know what to say about this. It's just bad. I'm sorry. I mean, you're here for the commentary, but yeah, this off the shoulder sequin top. It like treads the line. I don't know much about like party wear. I'm not wearing 80s party dresses everywhere we go. I think the one shoulder thing is pretty accurate. But I'm not quite sure about the total silhouette and again, the hair. Oh, wow. So apparently the wedding gown that she is wearing when she's dressed up as Princess Di is actually an 80s wedding gown from Etsy. So points there. I guess that's why it was pretty recognizable. And then the bird hat, which I did not mention, is of course from H&M. Great. And what's an 80s show without someone dressed as Madonna? Everyone in the 80s was just dressing like Madonna. I mean, I say that as a joke, but like everyone wanted to be Madonna. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty accurate, but again, the materials that they used are so cheap, it definitely seems like costume quality. And then last up is just those icons wearing Justice puffer vests and Santa's elves matching sweaters. So I honestly, if this isn't a Christmas episode, I don't know what to think. I really hope it is. It doesn't say anything about it being a Christmas episode. I'm scared. Okay, so the last thing we have to talk about is the Fendi Baguette. In just quickly perusing through Google, I found not one, not two, but 3 different Fendi Baguettes worn by Carrie throughout the series. And I understand why they did this because the Fendi Baguette was a huge part of Sex and the City. Carrie is basically constantly wearing one. So this is an ode to the original series. I understand that. But the Fendi Baguette wasn't invented until the late 90s. So she is just flaunting, carrying around a purse that doesn't exist. It's just all in her mind. Come on guys, I have to get to the fashion show. Do you like my purse miming? I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like this purse is a great example of the entire series' view on accuracy. It focused more on the accuracy of the original character's style rather than the accuracy of the time. And it also focused on the accuracy of what a 2013 teen would find appealing. And the accuracy of the time period seems to be an afterthought or a fun gimmick. I just like to point out that one of those Fendi bags probably could have dressed the entire cast in actual 80s clothing for an entire season. And I know it takes more effort to thrift all of your wardrobe, especially if you're going for a specific look, but honestly, they would have been able to pull that off just by sellers on Etsy. Especially in 2013 when 80s was in a little less demand, I'm sure the prices would have been lower. So that is my review of the fashion in the Carrie Diaries. I hope it gave you some insight into 80s fashion and what it truly means to be a costume designer. It is not just about making the clothes look good. It is about setting up the world building. And in this instance, Eric Damon did not do that. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.